Hi, welcome to this movie. And in this movie, we're going to start off looking at a very, very simple way of synchronizing our loops. I'm going to start off by making a live loop that plays chords. And it's going to use a very, very simple way of using chords. I use synth. And I'm going to have my chords up here. So my ring buffer of chord. Oh my gosh. I'm going to have that repeat. There are simpler ways of doing that, but this will do for the meantime. Butterfingers on the keyboard again. And what I'm going to do now is then do chord. Everything's 4, an octave 4, and I've got a mi there instead of a 7. And I want to make this another minor 7 as well, which I could do by scrolling down all the things, but let's make it a minor 9th. Okay, let's get my syntax correct. Everything correct. This should actually work. Okay, use synth seesaw. I'm going to put a tick up there so it's going through. I'm going to sleep for 4. Sleep for 2 actually, because I'm in. And that's okay, except that we now want to add some drums to it. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to do... I don't need to stop it actually. I could have left it running, but now I can speak to you. Easier, because there's less sound. So, sample... Okay, so 2 on the ends. See what we get here. And it's sounding a bit more musical. Now, both the drums and the keyboards, or the chords, were in sync because I started them at the same time with the run. And if I stop and start again, these will stay in sync because the timing in the timing in Sonic Pi is very good. So if we say to sleep for 2, and here we're effectively twice sleeping for 1, these 2 loops should stay in sync. However, things can be a little bit more interesting if you start new things going. So let's start these going, and I'm going to add something and see what happens when I start it playing. Okay, again, it doesn't sound too bad because I'm not doing anything that's obviously wrong. So let's put another live loop in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a trick on this one. It's going to be single note. And I want this single note to play once at the beginning of each bar to play a random note. So why not? Okay, so it plays that single note. I want the single note to last for a short time. That'll be able to be, and then sleep for 2. So if I now hit the run button, everything will be perfectly in sync. But I want to say I want to use this live loop a bit later. So I'm going to put a comment loop around it. What does a comment loop do? Fundamentally, it says that all of this inside the loop is now completely ignored. And I can start that at some later point. I'm also going to add to my hats an extra symbol so I can hear when the start of that loop is. Splash. There we go. That's what I want. Drum splash hard. Sorry, my memory is my memory. Yeah, so play the, and my ability to hit return when it highlights amp is my ability to hit return when it highlights amp. Okay, at the moment it's not playing this because this is commented out, so this live loop never actually started. So it's commented out, it's ignored, the rest of it all starts. I can hear when the starts of the bars are, etc. And let's see what happens if I restart, if I uncomment this and then start this going halfway through everything else playing. So let's see what happens. So what you heard is that I sort of intended that single note, which is quite quiet, which is quite quiet. I intended that to be at the start of a bar, which I will get now if I run this. Okay, I'm going to put this back inside its comment loop and show you a better way of uncommenting something. But I want this to actually become synchronized to the drums. So I want it to be synchronized to the drums so that even if I started at some unusual time, it synchronizes with the drums and then stays synchronized. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put at the beginning of my live loop drums, cue, I'm going to call it something like begin the bar. Okay. And I'm going to put at the front of my hats, sync, begin the bar. And here, inside my chords, I'm also going to have, so everything's going to be synced to that. Everything's going to be synchronized to the drums. The drums are going to be controlled. They're the conductor because they're issuing the cue and everything else is waiting. Let's see what happens if I do that. With this, remember, commented out. Okay, now things are a little bit unusual there, which was good because that's what I wanted to happen, is that everything started, but if you heard it, the hats didn't start sometime later. Fundamentally, the drums had already started, they'd issued the cue. This one then started looking for the sync to the same thing, begin the bar, and had to wait a whole bar before it got it, because it started up slightly later. So I'm going to show you a little bit how to fix that. What I'm going to do is that for the simplest kind of timing I do, is I have one live loop, which is just called timing. All it does is cue, begin the bar, and it knows that there's one there, then sleep for 2, and then end. So, what's going to happen there? I'm going to change the sync, or the cue up here, to a sync, which means that everything is listening to my conductor, and I won't even call this timing, I'll call it conductor, and okay, let's put the sync in there as well. So the single note, when it starts up, is going to sync to begin the bar as well. And let's check everything is syncing to begin the bar. There's the commented out one. There's conductor, begin the bar. Let's run it and see what we get. Okay, everything started up fine, but that's because this was the last one. If I make this one the first one, then what happens? Did you hear there was a pause? There was a pause because this was the first one to run. It cued begin the bar, but none of the other loops had started running. When they started running, they had to wait for us to go through a whole cycle, sleep for 2, sleep for a whole bar, before they could do their first sync. So always make the conductor the last live loop. This isn't going to quite be enough, and let's see why that is. Okay. This is, remember, is commented out at the moment, so a single note isn't playing, and I'm going to use the method of uncommenting it. And if I comment it out, everything here is just ignored. If I uncomment it, then everything here is then taken note of, and that's a fast way of uncommenting my live loop in such a way that I can quickly comment it back again. That can be quite useful in quite a lot of cases. So let's start this off again. Everything's going to sync to my conductor at the bottom, and everything is synced. Everything lasts approximately 1 bar. Then it comes back up and syncs to the beginning of the next bar. If we start things off and the conductor is the very last live loop, everything will work fine with no pause at the beginning. But there's still a problem we need to address. I said my live timing would still have a problem, and there is actually a problem I didn't expect. I thought that would sync perfectly, but if we actually listen, then this here is actually missing every second bar. But not if I start it like that. Let's comment it again, start again, and then uncomment it halfway through. Okay, so why is it taking that 2 bars to come back again and play again? Right, because I uncommented it halfway through when it was playing, it looks in the text file as if it's before the conductor, but because it's one that's added later, and this can apply if I modify one of these again up here, because it's added later, it's sort of like it's after the conductor track. So I have a not very nice, but effective way of dealing with this, of getting the synchronization working a bit better. With my conductor track, I never, ever, ever sleep for exactly 2. I always sleep for 2 plus a very, very, very tiny bit extra. So the conductor isn't quite in time, it's just slightly slower, and everything completes itself slightly before the conductor track. It's always slightly faster up here, so everything gets in the queue before the conductor, and this should solve some of our problems. Let's comment out the single note, and then play this and see what we get. And you can see that with my very, very slightly tighter conductor, that everything is starting to work. I can comment things and uncomment things, etc. Note one thing about comment. If I comment something after I've started the live loop playing, that means that everything in here is ignored. It doesn't mean that the live loop stops. That's a mistake I've seen people make. Let's just play around with that and see it. Let's comment it out again. So no single note at the beginning. Okay, that just showed you that if I comment it out again and then sort of rerun it again, it doesn't actually get rid of the live loop, it doesn't stop it playing. It will keep it playing because the comment means that this code is ignored. I'm not therefore saying that I should change the live loop single note in any way, so therefore it keeps on going. If we want a live loop to stop, and I'll start all of these at once, then we can do this another way. And there we go. So I stopped all my loops one by one. I can always start them up again by getting rid of the stop. And so on. That's the very, very simplest use of sync. And sync gets quite complicated if you're doing things like polyrhythms. And other people use different ways of handling this problem of things not always starting again when you expect them to. This is my favorite way of doing it. That is such a small amount of time that I don't think anybody will ever notice that it's very, very slightly out of time. Other people do different things. Some people just put up with the fact that sometimes when you change a live loop, it may stop for a bit and then come back again, etc. But I like personally having a bit of control and what I think of as simple and predictable behavior. Note with uncomment and comment, you can actually have code sitting around which is not being used and then suddenly bring it in. But remember that you need to use the stop as a command inside your live loop. It's one way of stopping the loop. It's my way of doing it. I just like doing it that way. It seems to work for me. Okay, so that's all we need to look at the moment. I think that's the end of this movie, and this is the beginning of making sure our music synchronizes a bit better.